Identity and Critical Theory Perspectives. Economic Inequality in Latin America. A recurring theme throughout this presentation is globalization. We will begin by defining the concept. Globalization is the worldwide movement toward economic, financial, trade, and communication integration. Globalization implies the opening of local and nationalistic perspectives to a broader outlook of an interconnected and interdependent world with free transfer of capital, goods, and services across national frontiers. The identity perspective puts forth the notion that ideas are more relevant than power or institutions when shaping international outcomes. Ideas define the values, norms, and beliefs that governments and international institutions hold and indicate how they will pursue and apply power. The construction of identities allows actors to define who they are and how they will interact with other actors. This construction allows the identity perspective to highlight the separate and common values of a globalizing world. Additionally, constructivism emphasizes the idea that the content of language and social discourse is more important than institutions of power. When identities overlap and fuse based on norms and images that cannot be traced back to a specific identity, shared identities are formed. One example of a widespread shared identity is the notion of environmental protection. From the identity perspective, development entails the process of material, institutional, and human progress in a country or region. Over the past 40 years, development, or lack thereof, has caused greater income inequality in many parts of the world. While developed countries have shifted from agrarian and manufacturing sectors to the technology-based, high-skilled service sector, many less developed countries lack economic diversification. Part of this lack of economic diversity lies in the cultural aspects of the state. For instance, new states who may be historically tribal in their organizational structure may not readily adopt individually centered ideologies such as capitalism. Also, many times these cultures lack the community prioritization of skills training or education needed for upward mobility. Critical theorists provide broad critiques of events in the international realm. They take a holistic approach to analyzing conflicts on the world stage and refuse to separate ideas, power, and institutions from one another, for, from their perspective, reality is a seamless web. This perspective uses history as a playbook for future events. Critical theorists look for commonalities in various past events and then apply their findings and analyses to the present. Of the different subgroups within critical theory, they each hold a utopian end goal for the world. In essence, the events being analyzed by critical theorists are all preliminary steps before their image of the world is actualized. In relation to economic inequality, critical theorists would begin their cascade of blame with the history of European colonialism in the 15th century. These actions taken by the Western nations of the world can be summarized as the gross exploitation of indigenous people for material gain. For critical theorists, this colonial exploitation drastically affected these indigenous societies and created a pattern of dependency and integration. This new societal structure operated on the basis of the developing world serving the goals and objectives of advanced countries. This is known as dependency theory. Dependency theory would become more formalized and serve as the foundation of the world systems model. This model views globalization in a negative light and claims that the global economy is stratified and fixed, dividing states into three categories: core states, peripheral states, and semi-peripheral states. Core states are large, powerful countries of the world that output innovative products, monopolize world markets, and possess the largest share of global wealth. Peripheral countries are the small and less developed countries of the world that output competitive products, but lag behind the production of core countries and possess the smallest amount of global wealth. Semi-peripheral countries produce an even mix of competitive products and monopoly products. According to Henry Nouw's perspectives on international relations, critical theorists view these issues from a systemic structural and systemic process level of analysis. Due to the deep-rooted historical factors and societal processes connected to Western growth and the continuation of these divisions. While income inequality can be observed in various places around the globe, one location that is interesting for study is the Latin American region. According to the Economic Commission of Latin America and the Caribbean, 8 of the 10 countries of the world that experienced vast divergence in income inequality were in Latin America. Both the identity and critical theorist perspective offer explanations as to why this phenomenon exists. From the identity perspective, the economic inequality of the region can be explained through the history of oppression that Latin American countries have experienced. From the colonization of European powers in the 1500s to the neo-colonial tactics taken by the United States throughout the 20th century, the regional culture has seemingly experienced waves of oppression. This cultural trait has resulted in an adoption of a deceptively charitable neo-Marxist ideology that further complicates the economic situation of the region. For example, under the socialist dictatorship of Hugo Chavez, the country of Venezuela experienced a detrimental blow to the economy. While those who elected Chavez to office, namely the poor and lower classes of the country, received short-term benefits such as housing, currency inflation in the country rose to over 800% and the supply of food became increasingly scarce. The perpetuation of the idea that the Venezuelan people are oppressed is further ingrained into the culture by the current president Nicolas Maduro. In an attempt to deflect the blame, the administration attributes the disparagement of the lower class to a false economic warfare initiated by the upper classes and global owners of industry. Although this argument has been disproven by various economists, it is still a widely held belief by the lower strata of Venezuelan society. Critical theorists would not disagree with the points made from the identity perspective. However, they would point out other factors that hold a strong influence in the region's economic inequality, the most notable being the influence of other state actors due to the globalized economy. In keeping with the example of Venezuela, the Latin American country is rich in the natural resource of oil. According to the Organization of Oil Exporting Countries, Venezuela's oil makes up 95% of its export revenues. Of all the countries Venezuela exports to, 50% of Venezuelan exports go to the U.S. Another major player in Venezuela is China. Over the past decade, China has increased their activity in the region, and through the Chinese Development Bank, has distributed tens of billions of dollars worth of loans to the country. China's liberal distribution of these loans is done in an effort to promote future opportunities for Chinese firms and contractors looking for business overseas. Critical theorists would view this as the core state's exploitation of peripheral states' natural resources. They would view this as proof of the stratification and fixed dynamic of the global economy.